Hi! In the last lesson we created our login form and displayed it to the user. In this lesson we'll discuss about the actual login process and a few more interesting things. But first I want to rectify a minor error. Back in our login.blade.php file, on line 14, I forgot to change the name for the password field from email to password. So I'll replace this with password, as this is my password field. Alright, let's get back to our business. In the user controller file, we decided that the first step of the user login process is to actually validate its input. In order to do that, we'll use the Laravel's validator class. Let's start by declaring an array that will hold our validation rules. I'll name this array rules, and then let's add some elements to this array. First, we want our username to be required. So in case the user does not enter a username in the login form, the validator will return an error. The next field, password, will also be required, and let's add another validation rule to it. Let's make the minimum length of the field to be 4. That means that in case the user enters a shorter password, our validator will also fail and will return an error. Next, we declare our validator. I'll start by creating a variable called validator, and we'll use the make function of the validator class to check for the form validation. This function will take two parameters. First will be our input specified by the user, which will grab it by using the input_all method call, and the second parameter will be our rules variable. In other words, we'll validate the user input against the rules that we defined earlier. Now, this validator can either fail or pass, depending on the parameters that it receives. So, next we use the fails function to redirect the user back to the login view and passing the error message to it. Otherwise, in case the validator passes, we'll declare an array which will hold our input data, the username and the password. We will use the get function of the input class to grab this data. Next, we attempt to authenticate the user by using the attempt method of the out class and passing the array that we previously declared as an argument. So, in case the authentication attempt is successful, we'll redirect our user to the home page. Back to our routes.php file, we can see that the home page is an alias for the main application page, the root URL of our app. In case the authentication fails, we redirect the user to the login page and will display an error message to notify him. We'll see how we can do this shortly. So, our login form is complete. Let's give it a try. I'll refresh the page and then we'll just press the login button without entering anything in the username and password fields. We should receive an error now, but this is not being displayed. Let's check our login view to see how we can display this error message. First, if we take a look at our controller file, we can see on line 29 that we pass the validator variable back to our login page in case the form contains some errors. We use the withErrors method to pass this variable, so in our view we'll be able to check for the errors variable name. So I'll type if errors. And now, in order to check if our variable contains an error or multiple errors about the username field, we'll use the has function. So, if error has, and then we pass our field, which is username, in parentheses and inside single quotes. So if our variable contains these errors, we want to display them. On the next line, we'll use the first function to grab the first error relating to the username and we'll display it. There could be more errors about the username field, so we grab the first one. And we end our statement with an and if. Next, I'm going to copy these 3 lines and we'll paste them after the password field. We'll also modify the username field with password. Now, if I submit the form again without providing anything as the username and password, we can see 2 errors displayed, letting us know that our username and password are both required. Nice! Let's try to enter a random text for the username field, and for the password I will enter just 1 character. If we remember, we set the rule for our password length to be at least 4 characters. By pressing the login button again, we can see the error saying that our password must be at least 4 characters long. See how easy and flexible it was to implement form validation? Let's enter more characters to the password and let's click the login button. There are no records in the database that will correspond to the ones that we provided, so we should not be able to log in. And indeed, we are not logged in, but also no message is displayed letting us know what happened. We'll get to this message a bit later. Let's finally log in with a valid username password combination. I'm going to type Christian for the username and 1234 for the password, and we receive an error, not found HTTP exception. Let's get back to our user controller and see what's happening. And indeed, on line 42 we use the to function of the route class to redirect the user to the home page. But if we want to use the route alias, which we did in this case, we have to use the route function. If we still want to use the to function, we'll have to provide the actual path for the route and not an alias, in our case a simple backslash, as this is the main page of our app. So we use route function with aliases and to function with the actual path. Let's use the route function here and refresh the page. I'm going to type again my password and the home page is displayed. Again, the books list is not styled yet, but we'll deal with this later. Let's try to log out. Another not found HTTP exception, this time because we didn't specify a logout route for our app. Let's get back to routes.php file and we'll add a new route, one that will deal with the logout action. We'll use the get function this time because we'll not pass any variable to it. We'll give the alias of logout to this route, and this will use the user controller class along with its logout function. Again, this will simply be called logout because there will be no post requests to this. Now, in our user controller, let's define our logout function. We'll declare a new public function called logout, which will take no parameters. What is the logout function going to do? It's easy. First we need to actually log out our user by destroying its session, and then we will redirect him to the login page. First step is done by calling the logout method of the out class. This will destroy the user session for us, and then we simply use the route function to redirect the user to the login view or page. Let's refresh the page and oops, unexpected end of file. It looks like we forgot to add the semicolon after the last route declaration in our routes file. Back to that file and we'll put the semicolon at the end of the line. Now, if we refresh the page, no errors. Great! These errors are a part of every developer's job. You don't have to get scared or something when you see them. Try to find the actual cause of the error and to deal with it as soon as possible. Laravel does a great job of giving us a possible description and cause for the error, as in this case. When dealing with framework-related errors or bugs, Google is your best friend to get rid of these errors as fast as possible. Now let's get back to our app. Let's try to log in with another user, let's say Michael. I'm able to log in successfully. However, the books that are being displayed are not the ones assigned to Michael in our database. Anyway, we'll get back to this in a second, but first let's log out and see if now it's working as expected. And Indeed, if we press on the logout link, we are being redirected to the login page. Let's see why the same books are being displayed no matter what user is logged in. Any idea why? Let's get back to our user controller class in order to find out why. If we scroll up to our home function, we can see on line 6 that we hard-coded the user ID earlier. We set this to be 1, so no matter what user is logging in, we grab the books for the user which has the ID of 1. Let's change this, so instead of the user find method, we'll use the out user function. Out user will return our currently authenticated user. Let's give it one more try. Back in our browser, let's again log in as Michael. And this time a single book is displayed. But is this the right book? Let's double check with our database records. The book title is The Adventure of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Let's switch to the phpMyAdmin page, and as we can see, The Adventure of Tom Sawyer is assigned to the user with the ID of 2. If we browse the users table, we can see that the user with the ID of 2 is Michael, the one that we used to log in, so the right book has been displayed. Good. Let's log out and we'll try to log in as Rachel this time. No books are being displayed. If we double check with our database, Rachel has the ID of 3. And if we browse our books table, no book is assigned to the user with the ID of 3. So indeed, Rachel has no books assigned. And finally, let's log in one more time with Christian, and this time 2 books are being displayed. Now, it's time to apply some CSS classes to the list that displays these books, because it doesn't look good right now. Let's switch back to home.blade.php, our home view. I'll start by adding some bootstrap classes to these elements in order to give a nicer look to our books list. And now, if we refresh the page, the list looks better. One last thing that I want to discuss before concluding this lesson is how to implement the Remember Me feature in our application. Most websites allows you to remain logged in for a longer period of time before you will be actually logged out. This is an optional feature. Let's implement this to our app. Let's start by inspecting the elements of our page. I'll switch to the Resources tab and we'll log in with a username and password. As soon as we log in, Laravel creates a new session variable called Laravel_session. As long as this session is set, we'll remain authenticated, so if I refresh the home page now, I will still be able to see its content. But what happens if I delete this session? If I refresh the home page now, I get redirected to the login page, because the session is no longer available. Let's implement the Remember Me feature. I'll start with login.blade.php file or the login view. Here, before the form submit button, I will insert a label along with a checkbox. This will allow us to specify if we want to use the Remember Me feature or not. I'll use the label function to create the label and the check function to create the checkbox. Let's refresh the page and the checkbox should have been placed first, before the label, but I'll leave it like this for now as it doesn't bother me too much. Now, if I click the label, the checkbox gets checked because we tied the label with the checkbox, so this works as expected. Next, let's implement this in our post-login function. So, right before performing the authentication attempt, I'll add a new variable, one called remember, that will hold the value of our checkbox, true or false. In order to obtain this value, I'll use the has function of the input class along with the ternary operation. So, in case the checkbox is checked, our remember variable will be set to true, otherwise it will be false. And in order to actually use this Remember Me feature, we simply pass this variable as an argument to our attempt function. So our attempt function takes another optional parameter, which can be either true or false, and according to this parameter, we'll keep the user logged in or not. Let's see how it actually works. I'll refresh the page and again we'll go to Inspect Element in my pop-up menu. Next, we'll open the Resources tab, and if I log in without using the Remember Me feature, the Laravel session is created. Again, if I delete the session and refresh the page, I get redirected to the login page. Now, let's log in by using the Remember Me feature. I'll make sure that the Remember Me checkbox is checked, and this time, along with the Laravel session, another one is created called Remember and some random text. So, if I refresh the page, both sessions are present. Now let's delete the Laravel session as we did earlier. Let's refresh the page and surprise! No more redirection to the login page. And the Laravel session is also back. We are still able to access the restricted page because of the Remember Me session variable. So, to summarize, in this lesson we added the login and logout functionality to our app. We used the Laravel's validator class in order to validate the user input, and we implemented the Remember Me feature in our app. This was also easy to do by writing only few lines of code. See you in the next lesson then.